Hi, welcome back to the Good Shepherd campus, and I am Theri Niemier. I am the Restoration Agriculture Education Specialist and Farm Manager here at Good Shepherd, and I'm here today with Laura and Andrew Garvey, and we are, they are team teachers for the junior high here, and we work very closely with farm and the junior high to create an integrated experience for our students. We're going to talk to you, we're going to take this session today to talk to you about how that works for us. It can happen different for different schools, but we want to share what we do because we find it does work. It works really well. So let's talk a little bit about the history of how we evolved. I've worked with Good Shepherd Montessori since they began in 2002, starting with they started with 16 kids and one classroom, and they used to come to the farm weekly. We continued that relationship as the school grew to include the next age group, which was the 4th through 6th graders. And then in, what year was it we started junior high?
We started the junior high in 2008, 2009, but you came fully on board right after you started, right? Mm-hmm. So was that 10 years ago?
2015.
Okay,
when you were fully...
Yeah.
Right. So once we added the junior high, we started thinking about ways that we could get the junior high more on the land as a continuing experience. So it started with me coming to the school once a week, and really we kind of all did this together. Yeah. So it was almost also a training session for us in working together and creating these connections. We did that for at least 2 years, maybe a little bit longer. And then in 2017, I started thinking about, long term. I wasn't ready to retire, but I wanted to have a plan because I wanted Good Shepherd to always have a farm to school program, and so did they. And to keep this sustainable, we started brainstorming ways that could happen, and bringing the farm to the landscape became kind of our answer. So in 2019, we began really beefing up the farm on the landscape here and creating a real working, could be profitable urban farm. So since then, we have been working. We grow and change every year and do better, drop the things that don't work, pick up new things to try. But we've really, I think we've brought together a great program between farm and school. Mm-hmm. And so that's what we want to share with you today.
Yeah, and the children that arrive in the 7th to 8th grade classroom in the junior high, they've had a whole, their entire education has been based on the land. So our 1st, 2nd, and 3rd graders go to a farm off campus. It's Prairie Winds Nature Farm, and they spend 3 years there, really just immersed in nature, explore.
That's once a week.
That's once a week, sorry. So one day each week they're spending the afternoon at the farm, exploring the different biomes there, learning about the environment, but really it's more of an experiential sort of immersion. And then in the upper elementary, so that's 4th, 5th, 6th graders, it's more of a sort of like a hybrid model where the students are working on like a small garden that you'd see behind us here, but they're also experiencing other farms. So they're going out and they're seeing different farms in the area to sort of get a sense for the different ways that food is brought to the table, so that when they arrive in the junior high, they've already got those sort of connections, and we are able to build on that. And then the connections within the curriculum are vast, and really there's not one part of the curriculum that can't be connected back to the farm in some sort of way. Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a benefit for us. Sometimes I joke as the science teacher that really I don't need to be here anymore because they have the farm. And everything that you learn from a traditional science text, and even in a more traditional setting, it would be hard not to be able to relate it to some form of work on the farm, especially with the approach that Theri takes with permaculture here. We're able to weave that in so seamlessly with all of our studies. And we find, especially at this age, our 12 to 14-year-olds, the importance not only of getting up out of their chairs and having physical work that they get to engage in, but also the experience of real ownership, the pride, the feeling of valorization that comes for them when they get to put seeds in the ground, see it grow, see it flourish, care for that living organism, and then either benefit from it nutritionally or monetarily through our microeconomy system, where they're, Theri will talk a little bit more about that later, but working not only selling things here on campus, but maybe off campus too with local co-ops or farmers markets. So the benefits are just vast, and I think what's great, we are fortunate here with the space and the land that we have, but we're also right in the middle of downtown South Bend. So I think Theri's done a beautiful job of showing how you can't use your limits of space as an excuse. You know, even if you're just growing in a box outside your classroom door or inside your classroom, there are ways that you can make these connections that really bring your studies to life. Science in particular, I think, is what I'll be talking a lot about today, but our literature, our history, our theology, all of our studies here at our school are totally interconnected with the farm work.
Right. So maybe we'll talk a little bit about how a day goes with a junior high student here as far as integrating the actual farm class. We start at, well, our farm class starts at around 9 o'clock and goes till noon each day. So we take our total students, and right now we're fortunate to be able to divide them into 4 groups to get really manageable groups. But we did used to divide it in half, and that worked too. So while half are at farm, the other half are having a more intimate, or are able to have a more intimate lesson somewhere else. And that's a really nice way of being able to, you know, to make 2 things better at once, actually. And then we're going to take a look at the farm classroom and talk more specifically about maybe how that day goes as well. And we'll do that shortly. Do you guys have any questions for us that could help us create the full picture?
Maybe just how often, like, one student is spending time each week outside.
Okay, great, thanks. Well, for the farm class, it's a 3-hour experience, and usually we try to get at least half of that time outside. There is some flexibility when we're working on research projects, when the weather doesn't work for us, but really getting their hands dirty once a week for at least an hour and a half during our 3-hour class. And I would say, and sometimes it's the whole 3 hours that we're outside, you know, in the spring and the fall when the work is, you know, plentiful, we're outside more. We're lucky enough to have a hoop house that even in the winter we can be outside for part of our time. But we have a lot of great projects that bring our studies together too, that require some indoor time as well. And we start every day with getting together. So every student once a week has a 3-hour time with me, but then there's also time outdoors in their regular studies, and that's the joy of having this on campus, is that it's not just a once a week experience, but and that kind of segues right into us talking more about how these subjects can bring farm in. So do you guys have any other questions before we maybe go that way a little bit?
Do you ever find that because they have come up through, like most students have come through, gone to Prairie Winds, had their upper elementary experience, by the time they get to junior high, is there an excitement about the new responsibilities they get to take on, or is there sort of like we know.
Not this again. Well, if you know junior high kids, there's a little bit of not this again when the shovels come out.
Yeah.
But, I mean, most of us maybe feel a little bit that way when we get started, but I think what brings a lot of value. And I think if you listen to the other presentations, you'll see more of this from the students themselves. It is the end product. What they're learning is that the great satisfaction of hard work. And sometimes I tell parents that's really my job, is to teach your kids the satisfaction of hard work. So, you know, they don't always look forward to hard work on the hot days, but they certainly love microeconomy. And they love adding that business side of the farming because, you know, there's a monetary reward, and, you know, most of us are somewhat driven by that. We need to be to some extent, right? So, no, they definitely have a passion all the way through.
And I think too, you know, even on the days where it's really hot or it's raining and they know they're going out anyway, or today's the day to clean out the, you know,
muck out the stalls.
muck out the stalls,
Or the compost.
all
yeah.
the dirty work has its own wonderful bonding experience for them as a group.
Yes.
Sometimes it's against us, like how'd they make us do this? But the stories then that they carry, that we hear throughout the year of, oh my gosh, remember that day when we had to do that horribly hard thing? But they feel the physical exhaustion, which is so wonderful. And I think too, for so many of our graduates who end up transitioning then into a school that's not a farm-based learning environment, the retrospect for them of really realizing what they miss now that they are largely inside at a desk. So even if they didn't fully appreciate it at the time, we get to see it kind of unfold for them as the years go by.
And then there's some that excel at it,
Yeah.
and they do better in the classroom because of it. They have high energy, and I always say the ADH gene is the farm gene because they have the ability to excel at that. I think school in general becomes a more exciting place, and that carries over to all the subjects.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Good question.
And we haven't even talked, I don't think, too much about the animal care piece of it and how
Sure.
essential that is. All the research that is being done on what that does for mental, emotional health for children, especially at this age, who are dealing with so much as they go through adolescence. So having this place to, whether it's the hard work of the chores or the quiet place to escape to during recess to hang out with the goats or to, you know, pet the bunnies, it allows for a refuge in the times when they're not working as well. And again, that the feeling of ownership that they have with this place and the connection to the land that they wouldn't otherwise have.
Yeah, and that is big. The animals add a whole new level of quality. So, yeah.
That does kind of segue into a question I had about mental health, because obviously transitioning into adolescence can be really heavy, and climate anxiety is super real.
Yeah.
And you're learning a lot of details about it as you transition into junior high. Do you find that mostly the work remedies those feelings, or does it maybe, you know, influence them in a different direction?
Great question, yeah. Because that information is like has a reverberating effect. You're right, absolutely. I think that what Theri's providing for them with regenerative farming is a beautiful thing that they're able to see that, like, it's hard to think that we can have an impact just with our daily choices, but I think that connecting the farm component allows them to really see that their choices will impact future generations, and they can have an impact right now. And I think that's empowering for an adolescent to not feel so helpless and to think, I can make choices that will help. Yeah.
And if we were just in the classroom, just learning science from a textbook and from the news, I think that would feel like there's nothing I can do. This is hopeless. But they have this to help. You know, Theri says all the time, knowledge is responsibility. I'm messing
Ignorance
this
is
up.
bliss.
Yes.
Knowledge is responsibility.
Yes.
Yes.
So there certainly is the added weight. We are informing them of the issues. We're not, you know, putting it, you know, hiding it away or avoiding it. But it is with this message of hope and empowerment too.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. I
Yeah.
think we breed hope. And hope is an active element of our everyday activities. So, yeah. But great question, because that's for sure is real. It is real. But yeah, so maybe we can take a little time to more specifically talk about the subjects and how they do interconnect classroom and farm.
Yeah.
Yeah, obviously there are the science connections. I think that those are the easiest to sort of spot. It's really anything that we cover inside of a science curriculum will be connected to the farm. But you had mentioned literature, you mentioned history, obviously microeconomy with mathematics. There's a lot that happens there. And this is, again, anything that these students are learning that's connected to farm, it's real. It's not something that's just theoretical. So having to figure out 20% of something, is that really a big deal? Oh yeah, it actually is, because we're thinking about microeconomy, and this is actually, I'm getting 30% of this, and what does that actually equate to? That is important for them, and then that becomes meaningful. But yeah, there's all sorts of articles that students are reading, whether it be science or whether it be farm or whether it be humanities, and that leads to all sorts of discussions. When you think about the importance of an adolescent finding their voice and finding out, finding that they matter, that happens inside of discussion groups. That these discussions that we're having about real topics, whether it's climate, whether it's about resilience, farming resiliency, these are opportunities for students to find their voice and find out how they really think about this, and engage in conversations with their peers about that. But I think there's just all sorts of, if we think about the different areas of the curriculum, they're all connected in a way.
Well, and I think about our business model too. We call it our third rule. Also reminds us that we're responsible for each other and care of. So it's 30% of our income goes back to the program to pay for expenses. 30% goes to, or 33 and a third percent would be more correct. A third, I should say, goes to a charity or a nonprofit, and then the last is equally divided amongst the working students. So it not only reminds them that part of our responsibility in life is always to care for others, it also reminds them that they're part of a team, and if they want to share in the third, then they should also be as active as any other member of the team. So it kind of calls them to their own responsibility in the work. And I have to remind them of that sometimes.
Well, I think this is also where it's important. We get so lost in the permaculture water in which we swim that we forget this is where it's different than a farming program. This is a permaculture program where you're very mindful of those ethics, right? That we are caring for ourselves, we're caring for the others, we're caring for the earth, which could be different with a different farming model, right? And then that's such a big part of our humanities discussions that ties into their history lessons. How have we done agriculture right in some ways in this country? How have we really messed it up? And we have a lot of work to do to fix that. And that's where I think, again, you're offering them such an important view of how to work with the land and not just take.
And I guess it's worth saying we do a 2-year cycle, and the first cycle is more really diving into the practical side of farming while adding the microeconomy and looking at conservation practices. And then the second year, which is steeped in conservation practices that we've already have a good sense of, we really look at the concept of permaculture. And not that everybody has to do that, but it is a nice way of bringing so much more into the farm and the discussion. And it's really so ecologically based and environmentally based. It brings in environmental science just naturally, and kinds of brings us to that place of hope when we are hearing about all the negative effects of industrial agriculture and the future of food security. So, yeah.
And so that 2-year cycle ties in perfectly with the science curriculum, right? And in fact, we've kind of meshed it such that, and when we say 2-year cycle, what we mean is we have our 7th and 8th graders for 2 years. So 1 year of sciences is the life sciences. We're looking at biology, genetics, DNA. So we can be looking at not only, plant cells under the microscope, but we can be talking about GMOs and having some moral debates and discussions around this. What does that even mean? What does it look like? What is this CRISPR thing where they can even go in and fiddle with DNA now? So all these different ways that we take what would traditionally be studied anyway in a science curriculum and then look at it through their farm lens. Tree of Life, all our botany studies, obviously we can come right outside to cut a flower and look at all the parts of the flower, all the parts of the plant. And then ecology is just all things permaculture, right? Seeing the interconnectedness and the interdependency, how if one thing is out of whack in a system, everything will be affected by that. And then our other year is the physical sciences. So we're doing chemistry. We study the soil balance. What do we need to be in balance for plants to thrive? What do different plants need from other plants? Photosynthesis and the chemical reaction that takes place for them to make their own food. They're coming out and looking at different hours of light on different parts of the property, what should be planted where or why not, based on the different chemistry or the light available. And then renewable energy and conservation, which again would all be part of our traditional studies in the classroom, but they get to literally work on building their own solar panels and installing them here on campus. They get to dig rain gardens and think, why is that such a necessary practice? How are we working to make best use of our water? So instead of just reading a paragraph in a book, they're doing the literal work here, which makes it memorable.